Hello, everyone. Today I had the pleasure of talking with Dothan City Commissioner Dave Stock. He's the commissioner for the City of Dothan District 4 and was elected to the office last year. Now, since then, I've been watching his voting record and his performance among the city commission board, and I've noticed that quite often on various different issues, he's had to be the minority view. In essence, take a principled stance on something that would win against the grain and wasn't popular with everyone else. In many cases, he admits that possibly it may have been a wrong decision, but it was based upon what he thought was right at the time instead of just going along to get along. Well, that level of fortitude in public service doesn't seem as common as we would all hope. And so he agreed to come talk to me about the courage necessary in order to take an unpopular stand sometimes in various different areas where he's had to serve so far. His years as a pilot in the United States Army has given him the internal resources to draw from when he has to make those principled decisions. Anyway, I think there was a fascinating conversation. I hope you'll join us for this journey. Thank you so much for coming to talk to me. Now, you're city commissioner for District 4.
That's correct.
What are the boundaries for that?
So we have an area that's south of Main Street as you get towards like South Park. So that kind of South Park area is pretty much our boundary as it continues all the way down through till the city limits. So Main Street in that South Park area, and then we go all the way out Main Street to the circle. So inside the circle, so Jamestown neighborhood, things like that. And then as you continue down inside the circle to Fortner Street, we run Fortner Street pretty much all the way out to the southwest. Most everything on the south side of Fortner Street, with the exception of a couple neighborhoods, but we do have like Highland South and that as well. So it's kind of a hodgepodge the way it's mixed up, but we have everything like the stadium area, is in District 4 where we just open new pickleball courts and where the Dothan Dragons play soccer. So we got a little bit of everything. It's very diverse, very broad, very large district.
And socioeconomically, it's very diverse as well.
It is.
And you have Station 2 is out that way, to the southwest. And then I tend to, my mind gravitates toward the fire service, and so I tend to put myself where all the stations are. My wife's like, no one else knows where the stations are. But if you're Main Street South, then that includes Station 10, and then 2 is for the South, and Dothan Utilities is out that way as well.
That's right.
So it was fun learning all these things through the Dothan 101 encounter in class. So that was really cool. But you were elected last year, correct?
I was kind of late to enter the race. Late May is when I decided I was going to throw my hat in the ring. And then the election was August 5th. And so we had a very condensed campaign, very hectic summer last summer, very hot summer. And so, that was first time getting into politics. I said I wanted to serve my community. And
what possessed you to jump into that, sausage grinder?
Well, I mean, I've always followed politics, but being a military guy for 23 years, you really can't participate, at least publicly.
No.
So you can vote, but that's about it. So I've always followed it, but never really had an opportunity. I really wanted to serve my community. I did. And there was another candidate in the race who I just honestly, I didn't really feel comfortable with giving him my vote. And so rather than saying, hey, I'm just going to complain because you're not a good candidate, that's not how I am. So I said, I'm going to go ahead and run. And and the guy's a good guy. I think we disagreed, on some things. So I said, I'm going to run. And I did. And, got the family together and went and talked with our pastor and we're like, hey, this is a big ordeal. Because I don't do anything lightly. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to try to do it to the best of my ability. So we went all in and I managed my entire campaign myself, did all the marketing myself. I funded it 100% myself. So it was a big undertaking. But we did it, and we were victorious, won 55-45 in August, and then we were sworn in the first week of October.
I remember when you came in, I think I may have been at one of those city commission meetings when you first began, and it was something. But from that very beginning, I've consistently kind of noticed that there are times when you're willing to be kind of the minority view. on certain issues.
Sure.
And that left me curious because, you know, I don't know that we ever outgrow the comforts of popularity.
No, I mean, I think it's almost a human basic need is to be welcomed and accepted, no doubt.
I've been there many times, and there's a sense in which, well, everybody else is doing this thing. Why do I have to be the odd one out? That's kind of an uncomfortable place. And if you're not naturally internally constituted just to be a contrarian, there's a little bit of a fortitude that it's required because it's not comfortable.
Right.
To be the one that kind of like, I have a different view than everybody else. But I've noticed that that's a role you've been willing to take.
Sure.
On a number of different occasions. I mean, case in point. I went through Dothan 101, and that I forget the gentleman, maybe Tommy Wright or someone else, but someone at one of the city services, it may have been, I can't remember the name of the department, but they were describing the traffic diet.
Yeah, that would probably be Tommy Wright. Yeah,
okay.
Public Works.
And so as that was being described to me, of course, in the back of my mind, I sat back and thought, I couldn't think of any objections to it. It seemed reasonable that you would not only this experiment, many people are inconvenienced, but nevertheless, it's all data. The scientist in me goes, well, you can never be without, you can never lack enough data.
Sure.
I mean, find out whether or not you're able to incentivize traffic to go around downtown, so long as ALDOT's allowing it. See if you're able to incentivize more industrial, larger traffic to go around downtown. If you want to promote downtown as a more pedestrian-friendly place.
Right.
And it seemed to make sense to me at the time, but I suspended judgment on that because there's a lot I know, there's a lot that I don't know. So, but I still heard what was described, and then I came to the city commission meeting, and I find that there's another view on that. And I'm like, that piqued my curiosity. And so I thought, well, not only was there another view on that, you're the only one giving the differing view on this. And I thought, okay, well, now I really want to know how it is that someone thinks this through and goes, I'm going to stand on XYZ view or principle in the face of maybe a bunch of colleagues all going, you think this is reasonable? Like, yeah, but I disagree. And that requires fortitude. And I think that's a seemingly kind of a rare trait in some cases. And so I wanted to ask you about that.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me come today. I would say you have to look at my background a little bit, right? So I grew up very poor in St. Louis. We had 5 kids in our family. Parents, both blue collar, and I struggled growing up like a lot of people who don't come from wealth. We had a lot of challenges, and I was on, free lunches at school, and, my parents were, on welfare, and we had church. I had a lot of hand-me-down things. So I understand what struggle is.
Yeah.
I grew up that way. And then, I joined the military when I was 19.
What branch? I'm sorry.
I was in the Army.
Okay.
For 23 years. And I ended up becoming a pilot, and just had a very, very exceptional career. Just, the Lord obviously worked his magic because, I've had the opportunity to meet presidents on multiple occasions and work very interesting things over my career that some poor kid from St. Louis, could not have planned the career that I had.
Where'd you fly?
I flew Blackhawks primarily.
Okay.
Yep. But also,
I have a parishioner training on those right now.
Okay. Yep. So Blackhawks, I flew Lakotas, which were right here at Fort Rucker been here for a long time. I flew them before they came to Fort Rucker, and then also some small airplanes.
Okay.
But so my military experience, so I understand what it means to work. I understand what it means to, at a very young age, my parents got divorced when I was 15. I was working full time at Taco Bell, getting 40 hours a week when I was in high school. And the reason it was Taco Bell is because they were open till 2 a.m. on the weekends, and I could get a lot of hours after school and then on the weekend. So I literally paid for everything that I needed, and it was on my own until I joined the Army. So I understand what it means to work hard. I understand what it means to operate in business and to look, and I understand leadership.
I hate to interrupt you, but it just sounds, I'm sorry, that's such an American story. Because I interact with some who got into, they knew what they wanted to do. They go to college, they get their training, they get their career, and that's what they did. It's like their career path is almost like this aqueduct that goes straight across the landscape, and it's a straight shot. And you're like, well, good for you. A lot of us know when our first minimum wage job was, the paper route we had before that,
Right.
and so all these different, we have many different circuitous ways into our success that were lessons we learned along the way. And it just seems like that's kind of like a very much, and I just hope this doesn't sound condescending, but it's almost like a biographic Americana.
Oh,
in
it
a
is.
sense. So many different experiences that you had the opportunity to have along this way. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it just stood out to me while you were talking.
No, I mean, you're right. And I mean, I do believe we live in the best country because I do believe it's if you do work hard, and we're not all guaranteed the same outcome, but I do believe we're all guaranteed the same opportunity.
Right.
And I mean, when I was 12, I was cutting grass so I could buy new tennis shoes. Like I didn't have a new pair of tennis shoes before that point, and I remember going out and buying some Reebok pumps. They were the coolest thing, and I cut a lot of grass to be able to buy those shoes. And then I've been working since a very young age, but I say all that because when you parents didn't go to college, so to later in life be able to go to college and get an education, to experience the crucible of the military, in combat, out of combat, leadership, and this all gets back to the point of like, well, how does someone get to this point in life where I don't like confrontation, but I'm not afraid of confrontation.
Right.
And it's because I think I've got courage and I've got experience. And, it's not easy. It's not easy to go against. But what people don't see, and I believe this to my core, there's more people who agree with me in the public than what you see. And so I talk to my constituents on a very frequent basis. A lot of them have my phone number. They call me. They'll email me, they'll instant message me. So I am very well connected to my constituents and to a lot of people in the city who are not my constituents, but they know that I'm willing to listen. So a lot of people will call me. I do think it is harder to go against the grain, and that's where that courage comes in, than it is to just go along. And there are some folks in this town, and I hate to be negative and to say this, but they try to make your life as difficult as possible, hoping you will just go along. And it's true. There's people with ghost Facebook accounts, fake Facebook accounts that will get on there and troll people on Facebook.
Oh, goodness.
These are very connected people in our town doing this. And they are very well informed about everything that's happening. And you can go look at, next time people are on Facebook, just look at some of the comments and then look and see their profiles and how they don't have any friends, or one or two, connections. And all they do is just vitriol is what they spew. And so they do this to try to intimidate.
Yeah.
They've created fake accounts and sent nasty messages to myself and to my wife.
Oh, gosh.
This is really what happens. They say a lot of things that aren't true. I was on a city trip in my room, in a hotel room, working on Alabama League of Municipalities Certified Municipal Officer Training. And they're like messaging my wife saying, your husband's out running around. This is the type of stuff that is happening. And I'm like, well, I'll show you what I'm working on. So there's just some really, really nasty folks that I think take things way too far, obviously. But they do that to try to intimidate you. They do that to try to make you go along with what they want. And it's just not going to work.
So I've been a priest for just about a year and a half now. I previously had been in full-time ministry many years ago. I was a pastor of a Baptist church in East Texas, and in a thriving metropolis called Fate, Texas. And it had just moved from a population of 500 to 5,000 because of a subdivision that was going in. And it was really interesting because it was fun. I was the chaplain for the local fire department. They were very proud of their fire department. And so the city council, he's the chaplain for the fire department. The station's the largest structure in the town. So we'd like him to do as chaplain for just about anything the city needs a chaplain for.
Right.
So I was giving the invocation of just about every dedication of anything, city council events, park dedications, whatever. It was kind of cool. It felt like I was walking through Mayberry, because you walk down the street and the gas station owner and the Dothan and the donut shop owner is like, hey, pastor, good to see you. So it was pretty cool. Well, then you start, you're kind of in that cool crowd where they're kind of going, Pastor, will you come, give the invocation to our city council? Sure, yeah, no problem. And so you do that with some regularity, and next thing you know, you're on a first name basis with the city council members, and the mayor goes to a hockey game with you. And boy, I was never cool in high school. Seems like I can make up for some lost time now. And so my chief pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, chap, I need to talk to you. You kind of look a lot through people through these kind of, I'm not calling you naive, but you do try to see the good in people, and just kind of concerned you might kind of walk into a grinder." "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, watch out." And he starts kind of sharing with me a little bit a little bit of things. He says, "And watch out for that guy over there. He's a snake in the grass." I'd never heard that term before. I grew up way up in the mountains of Northern California. But this is a term that he's a snake in the grass, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out he was the pastor of the other church in town also. I was like, really? That guy? Oh, yeah. And he was absolutely right. And so he kind of was trying to make me a little wary of, okay, just do what you do. Do what you do, but just remember that that's the arena. I'm like, this town's too small for something like that. He goes, "Oh, no, it's not. No. Don't fool yourself." And I thought, my goodness. Well, it's now put me on a journey of just thinking about human nature.
That's right.
And the size of the town doesn't really matter because it's full of people. Yeah. Anyway, so the same human stuff happens. And I learned that lesson back in Fate. And then for many years, I wasn't a pastor just because for some reason I thought God doesn't want to impose me on the church like that. And so I was, if you know the story of Jonah, I was on this, carnival cruise to Tarshish, kind of thumbing my nose at the whales circling the boat. And then eventually he goes like, "Okay, you're done fooling around, come back." And so I come back here and I'm spending a lot of time in Dothan, loving every minute of it. Feels very much like my hometown when I grew up. And I'm encountering city politics again.
Sure.
And I had to kind of resurrect some of those old lessons.
Yeah.
That when someone walks up and shakes your hand and says, "I'm glad to see you," that's not always true. They're not. Sometimes they're not.
I get a lot of fake smiles. No doubt. No doubt. A lot of, customary handshakes. But I think the things you're saying are true. I mean, human character, human nature, there's sin in this world, right? And there are people who try to carry an image, and I'm not perfect. I've made tons of mistakes in my life. There's all kinds of things that, I regret doing, of course, but, I've been going to Ridgecrest Baptist Church ever since we moved to Dothan, so 14 years ago. Just such a great church, great community, and I know I'm imperfect. I know I'm forgiven, and I know every day I try to do better.
Right.
But there's a difference between folks who, they want to keep up an image and what is their heart. And I think it's easy to see someone's heart if you look at what their intentions are.
Right.
And are your intentions good and you just, you fail sometimes because we all fall short? Sure. Or is it just, there's that hatred, there's that, constant battle. And I mean, I've seen that. And that's the part where a lot of folks ask me, what's the worst part about the job? And I mean, honestly, I'm not a naive person, but I really didn't think it'd be this kind of hateful on this level where, someone posts something positive about me on Facebook, and then there's someone just immediately jumping on, and trying to do the opposite. So
oh my gosh.
There's just a lot of hate out there. But, for me, when you ask that question about, well, how can you do it? It gets back to, my upbringing, my values, my morals, my ethics, my military experience.
Supportive family's got to play a big role.
It does. Yeah. It does. Yeah. And then, the military, tries to instill courage in you. You do a lot of things. I've been in Iraq. I've been in Bosnia. I've served in Korea. I've been in a lot of hard situations, much harder than what I'm experiencing here in Dothan, I assure you.
Exactly.
So some people give me a hard time on social media is really the least of my concerns. I think it's kind of pathetic, but it's, that's not going to scare me. So when you look at some of these votes, you talked about like the road diet. I went and talked to people. I talked to businesses, in this area and like, hey, how is this affecting you? And it's like, I can't pull out of my business anymore.
Oh, well.
You know,
Okay.
the traffic is so backed up, like people can't get to me. I used to be able to get, clients coming in from this direction or that direction. Now they can only get me one direction. So there's all types of things. And, when I ran for this office, I promised my constituents, and I talked to thousands of people. I mean, I was door knocking. I was out there. This was not a social media campaign. This was a boots on the ground, me out there getting to tell people who I am and what my heart is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I connected with so many. In fact, if you look at that election, I received more votes than any other candidate anywhere in the city except for like a citywide race.
Okay.
So, the mayor, school board, those are citywide.
Right.
School board chairman. But besides those two, I received more individual votes than anybody else during the entire election. And I think that's because I did get out there and I connected and I told people I was going to do what's right. And, people have different opinions on what right is.
Right.
I think there's usually only one truth, but there's different perspectives on, well, you take this into account or that into account. So I'm trying to do the overall best right thing. So the road diet was very, very nasty. We got emails from people. And if I showed these emails to folks, these are very well-known people in town, and they were just hateful and condescending.
Oh, no.
And how short-sighted we were.
Yeah.
That was one of the comments that stood out to me. And I'm like, so because I have a different opinion from you, all of a sudden now I'm short-sighted. Maybe I have more facts, more information, more data that, so it is hard. It's hard when you have these things and you're going up against, what I call the establishment. It's a lot of people who are just dug in. And in modern political parlance, we tend to think of the establishment as something that's distant away in Washington, D.C. Oh, yeah.
And it's not. It's a mentality that actually can permeate the smallest towns across America too.
Sure. And I think I did not grow up in politics, but I've been a student of politics, and I've watched and I've learned, and I know some great politicians. We have a great representative in Barry Moore, very faithful guy. I know he's gonna be our next senator, and I've known him for a couple of years, and I'll call and ask him questions and bounce things off him. But doing what you feel is right, not based on your morals, your ethics, and your convictions, of course.
Yeah.
But then also, what's best for the people. Yeah. And over the last year, I've gone to a number of these different training sessions that's put on by this League of Municipalities in Alabama. And many of the speakers, they reinforce this, like, don't just do what's good for a few. You have to look out for your entire community.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think in the past, these comments I make, a lot of times people, they take things I say the wrong way. They want to internalize it as something negative. When I say something like, hey, for the long time, I don't think we've done what's best for all the people. That's not a dig on any one commissioner or whatnot, but it's like, are we really doing what's best for a large group? And so, like, the road diet's a classic example. That was disrupting the lives of a lot of people to try to slow traffic down a little bit between two blocks.
Okay.
Right. And on those two blocks, there were maybe 8 or 9 businesses, total. Yeah. So, the traffic getting from one side of Main Street to the other side of Main Street, we control the traffic lights. We control signal timing.
Right.
I got pretty upset when I felt like we were promised something. We were promised that we would have the final say on that road diet. And then at the last minute, it's like, oh, well, ALDOT decides. That's not what you told me. That's not what you told all the commissioners, And so at some point, we have to take a stand and say, hey, we're going to stand up for what we feel is right. And so that got a little bit more heated than I wanted it to. I don't like going on the news. I don't like being out there in public and calling people liars. I don't. It's not what I'm not a confrontational person. You talked about.
That's the problem. My vanity knows no bounds, and I'll jump in front of the camera all day long. But typically, as I'm always trying to say something nice. But for yourself, you had to kind of be vocally the minority view. Does that create tensions? I mean, I don't know what people mean oftentimes when they talk about the idea of backroom deals. It's always like a negative connotation. But for many of us who want our government to operate efficiently, don't you want conversations to be able to happen across the hall without having to, appeal to the news? And I imagine is there a side that you go, man, I wish we could have taken care of this just as colleagues rather than having to make it such a public statement? Is there a side to that, or is just it was necessary to put it out there like that?
I share both feelings, both thought processes. Part of me feels like, hey, our public expects us to debate and expects us to talk things out in public so they can see what's going on. So I agree with that aspect of it. I also agree with the fact that, yeah, they're not everything, some things are easy and, we can work out, but I think the contentious or more challenging issues that we face as a city, the public expects that debate. And in fact, the law requires us to have that public debate. So the Open Meetings Act that we have in Alabama, you're not supposed to have more than 3 commissioners together talking about things. You can't even do chain meetings where you have one talking to the other, because
it's the phone game from school.
That's right. And they want people to have that public debate. They want people to have that, and it's okay to disagree. And that's something I try telling folks. It's okay to disagree. The road diet, I won that. I mean, we as a minority, I was on the winning side, but I mean, there were 4 commissioners who voted in favor of returning it back to the way it was. So I was the only one to really speak out about it, but I was on the right side of the issue. And so I think when you ask about, well, why was I the only one speaking out? I mean, it gets back to that courage, and it gets back to, who's really comfortable with the confrontation. Again, not that I seek it, but I'm not afraid of it. So that's the difference. Sometimes I've been the only one. Like I was the only one to vote against the electric rate study that the city wanted to do.
Electric rate study? Okay.
So that was one of my first few votes last year. The city manager wanted us to do a study on all of our electric rates. And I'm like, well, there's only one reason why you'd want to do a study, and it's to raise the price of our electric.
I see.
And when I ran last year, I mean, there's so many great stories of folks I met, but we have people who can barely pay their bills today.
There's like I said, we're socioeconomically we're rather diverse. I mean, you've got the high end, and you've got the low end, and so forth.
And there's a lot more on the lower end. There are, and there's a lot of folks who, and I'm not talking about just people making bad choices and not, whatever.
Right.
There's a lot of elderly folks who are on fixed incomes who I visited this one home, and I knocked on the door, and this elderly lady answered the phone, and I kind of gave her my little card, my spiel, and I'm like, just asking for your vote and your trust. And she said, well, my husband just got home from the hospital. Can you come inside for a minute? And so I'm like, sure. So I stepped inside, and she introduced me, and she said, can you go ahead and tell him again? And about that same point in time, just the heat from inside the house was like almost overwhelming. It was so warm in there. And as I got to talk to them, it was quite obvious they're not running their air conditioner because they can't afford to. Wow. So this was a couple easily in their mid 80s, just trying to survive. And so I met a lot of folks like that. And I think our job is to represent our people and to look out for everybody. Right. And so when I heard about this electric rate study, and I can tell you 100 other stories just like that, but when I heard about this, I'm like, well, what's the intent? We wouldn't have this if we wouldn't even pay the money to do this, $100,000, and we were going to get some of that back in the long run. But why would we do that if we weren't going to try to raise the rates? And one thing that I love about our area is the cost of living is relatively cheap compared to any place else I've ever lived all across the country. Right. And the data, in fact, is funny. Little tangent. We get all these great news stories like, hey, Dothan, Alabama is one of the top 5 places to live in the entire state based on cost of living. Right. And so then we have all these people who are working against that. They want to raise this, they want to raise that. I'm like, you're impacting our cost of living, and now you're going to make it more expensive. So now all these great things you like to highlight won't be the case anymore.
What was the counter argument though at the time? Did someone argue for the necessity based upon maintenance to power lines, the power grid, and so forth? I mean, what was the counter argument?
Yeah, I'll get to that here in 1 second.
I mean, I don't like anything to go up either. I really don't.
I'll tell you. So our Dothan Utilities is one of the best utility providers of anywhere I've ever lived.
Okay.
And we are profiting a lot of money every year. Profiting, we're talking millions and millions of dollars in profit after all of our expenses. So we actually put a lot of money into our general fund from our utility fund. So the utility department's run like its own business.
Okay.
And it is doing very well. So the reason why they wanted to do this was because, well, other utilities are charging more money. That was what we were told. So Alabama Power is not cheap, and I'm not trying to dig on Alabama Power. They've got a business model and shareholders, but let me tell you, they are not cheap. Dothan Utilities is the cheapest electric service provider in the area by far.
Okay.
And it's like, well, everyone else is charging more, so we can probably, and this study is going to come out later this summer or this fall. We haven't even got the results back yet, but it was supposed to be comparing us to other utilities to see if we had the ability to kind of match them and come up some.
I see.
So just because there's no economic need unless we want to pay for a new arena or other things, but there's no reason why the cost of maintaining that service required us to go up. So I was the lone person that voted against that. And the reasons why I just shared with you is because I'm like, we already have a good service. We're making millions of dollars a year. We're not losing money on it. And we have people who can barely run their air conditioner just to survive today. I'm not going to do that to them.
No one even offered the argument that, well, by increasing revenue in category A, you actually are able to fund category B that is not a revenue stream, but is still necessary to the community. I mean, like police and fire is not a revenue stream.
Parks. Most parks aren't either. Mm-hmm.
Right. So no one even made that argument?
Well, I think that's the constant argument.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's a constant argument of we have other things. I think if you look at police and fire, and I'm not going to quote the exact number, but they take over half of our budget. They're very expensive, and they do a great job. We need them, but they're very expensive. So yes, you're always going to have parks, just maintaining parks, and you're going to have those expenses for the police and fire. So there's quality of life and there's safety and security that we have to have, but at the expense of what? And that's what it gets back to. It's like, well, there's probably some ways we can do this, and there's some ways we can't, and there's other things. Like the furniture. The furniture kind of blew up real big actually there was a vote on it last fall, and I voted against the $1 million of furniture then. And then it came up again. They didn't even tell us it was coming up a second time. It came up a second time for another $1.4 million. And to be honest, we were all kind of caught off guard. Like, what do you mean? I thought we just voted on this. And, the argument that was made is, well, it's in line with standard building dollar amounts because we're spending $70 million on this new City Hall complex, these two buildings, $70 million, not 50, but 70. So based upon that amount, if you use this standard industry percentage, then this is well below what we should be. And I'm like, okay, what's the cost per square foot of the buildings that we're building compared to a normal building, right? So if we're paying 2 to 3 times per square foot, for what a normal building would be, then we're artificially increasing the amounts of furniture. And then again, I was quite all right. I think last fall when this came up, I said, I'll back my truck up here and move my furniture to my new office. No problem. Nothing wrong with my furniture. So we have these.
So my wife is an accountant. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was at that vote came up or something rose up about the furniture when the same one where the Dothan 101 class was being recognized. And so for their completion.
Yeah.
And so my wife actually was sitting with me in the back, and she's an accountant and she spent many years in audit. And so she's like, she was prepared to be bored out of her mind with the rest of the meeting
until that,
except for the part where we get up and we're recognized for completing Dothan 101.
Right.
But all of a sudden, her radar starts really pinging as is it Commissioner Bedwell?
Bedwell.
Mm-hmm. He spoke about it, and then others were speaking about the furniture problem. And she started doing calculations in her brain. She's like, what's their audit company? Who's looking for all the different financial accountability on how necessary is it to spend $1.4 million on furniture? And does that suggest you have no existing adequate furniture right now? And what will happen with all that furniture? How will that become a revenue stream when that's sold or auctioned or whatever? And so she started to so suddenly now she's interested in the rest of the meeting.
And this is where it gets. again, I don't have any ill will towards any of the city staff at all, or any of my fellow commissioners, but I have a difference of opinion.
Right.
And I think it should be okay. When a commissioner disagrees with me, I don't hate them. I don't go online and bash and say this person's horrible. I'm like, but I have a philosophical disagreement. So
sure, it can be passionate, though.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being passionate, but you know, at the end of the day, I mean, I disagree with Commissioner Crutchfield on some things, and we have no problem going to lunch and talking about different things. And you know, we did a great tour of Amazon together, yesterday. And but yeah, so when it gets back to the furniture, yes, we have suitable furniture. Well, this doesn't match the appearance of the new building, or we have things like that. And my job is, again, if I just think about what Dave Stock wants, I think I'm doing something wrong. I should be caring about what the people want. I'm here to represent the people. And I think every one of us should be thinking more about that. What do the people want than what do we want individually? Right. And so I feel like maybe sometimes, our team doesn't do that. And they think, well, this is normal, this is standard. And again, I have commissioners call me and say, why can't my road be repaved? And then when I ask, our public works or our city staff, I'm like, hey, where are we in the budget for this? Oh, we don't have the funds. I'm tired of hearing we don't have the funds when we're wasting money on furniture that we could just move some. And I will tell you, we're going to be trickling down for our furniture. So my furniture in my office will end up in some other director's office, and then it's all going to trickle down.
Right.
And then the worst of the worst will just get thrown away, I'm sure. So, it's kind of challenging. And again, I don't mind being the only person to speak up, because I know, and I believe this in my heart, that the majority of people agree with my feelings. Although not every commissioner maybe has the courage. Commissioner Bedwell did stand up, and his point that he made was a little bit different than mine. We get a commission packet, and it's very similar, if not exact, to what's put out online. Uh-huh. Sometimes we get additional details if we have questions, but there was no itemized cost. I think there were some things missing, as far as like what is every piece of furniture we're getting and how much. We didn't get that. We got some general things. If you look at that packet, some general, groupings and some total cost, so I believe sometimes things are not provided to us on purpose. I do. And they probably not provided because they don't want the public or the media to get their hands on them, because some things, may not come out well. So Commissioner Bedwell's perspective, and not to speak for him, but what he said publicly was, I have a hard time on voting for another 1.4 million, in addition to the other 1 million that was already voted on and approved, not by me, but $2.4 million worth of furniture, and we can't even get an itemized, legitimate cost breakdown and show me how it adds up to that. Yeah. So that's the part where, again, as elected officials, and every vote I take, I read the entire packet. I know what I'm voting on, and that particular expense was hidden under a broad category of expenses over $30,000. It wasn't its own resolution like it was the previous time it came up. It was kind of hidden in there. And so I'm not going to vote on something if I don't know the details and really understand what we're paying for. And that was Bradley's contention as well. He's like, you're not giving me enough information to be able to say yes on this.
That's one of the chief things that can really gum up the works, is that those that are really paying attention. Because everyone else is like, sure, yeah, let's keep it moving along. Because one of the chief complaints many people get is, oftentimes will offer, is the inefficiency of government. And you say, well, okay, fine. You want to complain about the inefficiency of it. At the same time, though, you also like a very transparent process, which by nature is going to slow things down, and so that everyone has an opportunity to examine what they're looking at. Those are two things that you have to balance. Like, you want transparency, it takes longer to make sure that all this money is being spent well. That's because I'm sensitive to making sure we saw everything that police is getting. That's wonderful in terms of all their tools. Do our firefighters, do they have a competitive compensation package? And are they equipped, and are we able to incentivize a next generation of young men to take on this calling that they have? And so those are the kind of things I'm like, if we say no, or this is our cap, why did it's because someone has purchased the Resolute desk for their office, that when the previous one would have been adequate? I don't know.
I would like to see how much the new conference room table in the new city hall costs, because we couldn't see that number.
Oh, goodness.
But I will be willing to bet it's pretty close to six figures, if I had to guess. Haven't seen the number. I could be totally wrong. But yes, I mean, and so does it slow things down? Sure.
Right.
Is that a good thing? Yes. If you do care about, transparency, if you care about fiscal accountability, I had a lot of people who, when I ran last summer, they said, we don't want just a yes man. That's not what the public wants, I don't believe. They want someone who's willing to stand up and say, I'm just going to ask some questions. Yeah. It's not bad. Right. But, if people just go along, and I've seen this in the military. I've worked for a lot of general officers over my career, some of the best Americans that we have in this country. And they were some tough folks. I mean, they would ask some hard questions, and it makes the process better. Yeah. It makes the staff better. It makes the product, the end result, better by asking hard questions. And I think we have too many people who, hard questions make me uncomfortable,
right?
And so then now you're the devil because you're asking hard questions when really it's like the end product is better. Everyone will be better for it if we ask some hard questions. So I think we just have a bunch of good folks in this town, whether they're elected officials or staff, but do they have really a lot of world leadership experience? Do they really understand hard process? Do they really understand leadership and what it takes to be efficient and be successful? And I'm not saying we don't have successful people, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we have some folks who maybe just they want the easy way rather than the right way.
Well, you talked about the machine earlier. The establishment. It's not just a term that applies to national politics. It's a human nature problem that affects any political entity, and that it creates that machine, whether it's local municipal government or anything on the national scale. On the national scale, that machine that kind of just wants to keep itself going, and those that have to step in and say, no, you do want the machine to operate, but it's not just about doing things right. It's also about doing right things.
Sure.
And so now you start asking genuine, tough questions, probing questions, things that require a little bit more transparency, a little bit more accountability. And I don't know if you're like me, but I'm not internally constituted to be the natural contrarian.
I'm not, no.
But because you're willing to, you don't seek conflict, but because you're willing to take that on just to get clarity, just for the right thing to occur, the accusation of desiring conflict might come up.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever gotten immune to that. I still get annoyed. Like, no, I don't desire conflict. It's just this has to be pursued. It's necessary that we look at this sufficiently. And personal story, I was at the University of Houston. I taught there for several years as part of their religious studies program. And they were at one point selecting a new program chair for the religious studies program. The previous program director was retiring. I took over a bunch of his classes, and they needed to select they needed to find new candidates who could replace him for program director for this religious studies for the University of Houston. It was all under their comparative cultural studies department. Anyway, I was the most junior person sitting on the panel. Everyone else is doctor this, doctor this, doctor this. And I'm here both. I have a master's degree, but I'm also a graduate student working on my second master's in anthropology. The most junior person there. And I'd been brought on as kind of a courtesy, just to kind of like, okay, you'll have a vote, but really you're watching how the process unfolds.
Right.
So we go through all these different candidates, and each person gives their resume, and they had to go through multiple resumes, and it came down to two candidates. One was his scholarship. He was from Germany, and he had scholarship as an Old Testament specialist. And then the other one had a different theological background, and he was kind of an avant-garde, edgy person who likes to study Nietzsche's death of God concept as it relates to teaching religion. And so all these, anthropology tends to be the department that tends to be the most woke in a university.
Sure.
Anyway, and unless it's a subject that ends with the word studies, but
Yeah.
But anthropology tends to be it's full of godless atheists, atheistic Marxists. And so it was always kind of a fun arena to be in, being kind of fish out of water that way. But nevertheless, they all loved the guy, the Death of God guy. He's like, oh, he's edgy, he's sexy, he's right there on the cutting edge. And they all voted, and they came down to these two candidates. They were going to offer the position to one or the other. And I don't remember exactly how many were on the panel, but nevertheless, they all came around, and all of them said, okay, we like this guy, this candidate A. And I said, the previous director, the previous program director, has built a lot of goodwill in the community with religious people in the community, interfaith dialogue with various different groups, many groups that I don't even agree with, but still, though, he was able to promote that because his background somewhat honored their traditions in a sense, didn't declare them all to be misguided idiots. And so I'm going to go with candidate B. You were voting on this. And they said, well, you're the only one. You're the most junior guy. I said, I know, but I'm willing to be the minority view on this.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, and you're outvoted. You understand that? I said, I understand. And I understand that my vote, I'm just like, I'm not quite at the grown-up table at Thanksgiving anyway, but I'm willing to be the minority view. Anyway, so as they offer the position to candidate A, and at the last minute, he tries to change the deal with different compensation, and the negotiations basically fall apart.
Right.
And the job is offered to candidate B, who comes as now the new program director, with the knowledge that I was the only one in that department that voted for him. And it was really kind of fun we were able to have a special relationship that way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you had a friend at that point, right?
But it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I like people.
I do too. I mean, I'm a very social person. I mean, I don't drink or go out drink socially or do things like that. But I mean, I do love to go out and party and have fun with people and go to events. And I mean, I love to joke around. I mean, my wife tells me I joke around too much. I mean, I do want to be friendly and get along with everybody.
Right.
And I don't like conflict. In my job as a business person, I've had the unfortunate circumstance where I've had to fire a lot of people, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. So conflict is not something that I like. I think in politics, it comes down to it's a necessary evil.
Right,
You're going to have those. So, don't get into politics if you're not going to be willing to stand up, because the tide to push you to just go with the flow is very strong, and swimming against that tide is very challenging.
And while no one seriously would compare this to your combat and military experience, nevertheless, there are probably surprising ways they're similar in this respect, that there are probably surprising ways in which the virtue of fortitude has proven necessary in ways you didn't predict.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, and part of that is having a tight team. And when I say that, my wife and my children, there are folks that, they talk, and it's not easy for family to hear people talk bad about, dad. And I think people lose sight of that. I mean, we have families, and so it's talking with my team and my wife and my kids saying, hey, this is what's going on, everything's gonna be fine, but you're going to hear some things. People are a little bit unhappy with me for this reason, but nothing I have said or done has been whimsical. There's been rationale, there's been analysis, and there's been, talking to our constituents. So I'm very comfortable with everything that I've done, even and being the minority person. Sometimes I hate when, the I told you so's, but I promise there's going to be plenty of I told you so moments on these votes I've had. And there's going to be a lot of things where when all is said and done, I don't think the commission will have the will to go against the people on a lot of things.
Right.
And so we'll see. Time will tell. I mean, we're going to most likely raise garbage rates in the city of Dothan coming up.
Yeah.
When you mentioned earlier about electric, well, was the cost of this being so much, and is there a reason for that? Well, garbage, we have a big issue. We're losing $5-6 million a year right now on our garbage service. And that is difficult we have the best garbage service of any place I've lived anywhere in the world. I mean, when you look at what they pick up, I mean, but that's expensive, and we've only been charging $14.75 for over a decade.
Right.
So when you think about that, it probably wasn't even making money a decade ago.
No.
And it's only gotten worse with inflation and other things. So, we're going to see some hard votes. There's some things that we're probably going to have to vote to raise some of the fees on because, we have to be fiscally responsible.
Right.
And that's where it takes courage to tell your constituency too. It's like, I'm sorry, this is what we have to do. But I think they are more receptive, and they appreciate it when we push back against things where we can.
Right.
Like furniture, or when it comes to other things, right. Like we're going to push back where we can, but I think that I have more trust with them because when I do say I'm behind this and this is the reason why, like, okay, well, he pushes back on the nonsense, so we know this must be real. So right. I think it actually gives us more credibility when we're willing to speak up, and we're willing to challenge just, and do the hard right thing. So
I think that's where a lot of respect winds up coming back to the person who's had to be run contrary to others, and that respect comes back to you in that sense, because especially if you're willing to be honest and say, listen, I oppose the rate hike in A because it just wasn't necessary, but in B it is. And then, and here's why, and you can make that argument to people. I think they feel respected in that regard, and I think that gets reciprocated.
Yeah, and I've had some constituents who've reached out to me, and they're like, "Okay, what you said on this makes sense." So a lot of people, they don't want to ever see anything go up, and I mean that's just not the world that we live in. Right. I mean, the federal government tries to keep inflation at 2% per year, and we've had some years where it was way higher than 2%. So by nature, things are always going to get more expensive. Mm-hmm. That's why Social Security gives you a cost of living allowance every year, because they know everything gets more expensive. So to say things will never go up is not reality.
Right.
But I think we can push back in certain areas, try to keep our costs as low as we can, where it's fiscally responsible to do that. And like you said, going against the grain sometimes is tough, but I do think people appreciate it. They respect you for it. And every vote, every time I've gone against something, I mean, I'm not doing it just to cause a fight.
Right.
But I do sleep well at night knowing that I'm trying to do the right things, and I'm not going to be in politics forever. No. I don't really know how long, if I'll do another term or if I'll run for something else. But I do know that, every vote, that I take every vote seriously, and every vote, I feel like I can stand behind. So even if I'm the only person voting that way.
Well, and that resolve for fortitude and transparency and respect, that's going to constantly be tested. And I mean, so I wanted to celebrate the fact that, you're again willing to be that minority view. That's a big challenge. I know that that's the case. And so appreciate you coming in to talk to me.
Definitely. Well, and I appreciate obviously what you do for our community. You were always present at the meetings, or at least I don't know if I've missed you at any of them, but I mean, I think people need to get involved. They need to see it, be a part of it. I went to a lot of commission meetings before I ever ran for, commissioner. And so I do think that is good to be out there and be involved. And so I thank you for being out there, being present, being involved, because I wish more people would do it. And I think it's a good thing.
Well, if nothing else, I learned this years ago, when I just had become a chaplain for our fire department, and that something that seminary never taught me. I always say that my first department was the best seminary class I ever had, because the seminary taught me a lot of things to do and believe and do. But ministry as a minister really fell more on what you are. And so I found that calling it was called to do, but it was more so called to be. And that being, what you embody, what you do in terms of just your presence in a thing, has a great effect. And I remember specifically, I was with some firefighters. We had just gotten off a house fire, and we got back to the station. They're taking their gear off, and everyone's exhausted. And they said, "Boy, I was sure glad God was with us on that call." And I went, "Okay, now you got my curiosity up. What makes you think that God was with you, particularly on that call?" And he says, "Well, there you were, walking around, changing air bottles and bringing us water." I'm like, "Oh, okay. So this is how you interpret my presence."
Right.
That was scary, because I didn't even think of myself that way. That you're embodying someone's reminder. you're not God, but you're there in some sort of sacramental way, embodying someone's reminder that God's with you on the call. And that gave me a passion for being with firefighters whenever they could. I wound up being, I'm very much an embedded fire chaplain. I had a shirt made up, John 1:14 says, and then the word became flesh and rode the truck with us. Because whenever I could, you just wanted to be a living embodiment of reminding, oh, God's in this process. And here's this guy walking around reminding us all of that.
Right.
That's all you are, is you're walking around as this sign going, there isn't a process where God kind of goes, hey, handle your business. I'll see you in a minute. He's always present in all that. And what I learned is that to the extent that I could do that with police officers, I love being around, police officers. I've already gotten a chance to do a ride along with Dothan PD.
Oh yeah, they're great.
It was fantastic. And one of the things that if I'm able to I go to the city commission. I was at the county commission meeting on Monday, and the person they had slated to give their own vocation then wasn't there for some reason. And so Chairman Shoup was able to go, hey, Father, can you, front and center. I'm like, yes, sir. And so, but you're able to be just like this, just reminder where maybe someone's going, oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. God's watching this. I'm not that, but it's a reminder. Yeah. Sacramentally, you show up and you're just like a reminder. Someone goes, okay, God's watching this entire process, which requires fortitude, integrity, transparency, honesty, right? Sure. And that when someone says I am for X, they actually are for that thing, and not secretly for Y. But they're telling you one thing and meaning another, and that's all of us are. Many of us are. We watched like national politics. And when I tend to group politicians into two groups, the gamers will appreciate this because I refer to them as independent players and NPC, non-playable characters, mm-hmm. because they're just in a loop, right? They're in a set loop of the responses that they just do. And then the independent player actually might stop and talk to you. And, with a set of unprogrammed responses.
All right.
And so when you encounter enough of that, you're like, how many independent players are actually in part of this game? Are there any of them here that are thinking for themselves with conscience, with conviction, with families to whom they have to go home and look square in the eye, and friendships that they have to, honestly disagree with and say, brother, love you, but I see this in a different way than you do.
Right.
And with the respect enough to actually have that honest conversation. And it seems like that sets the bar pretty low, but it's not. That's almost a pie in the sky dream at this point. And sometimes it seems.
It is. And I would even say that local politics is harder than national politics, because when you think about on the local level, almost everything that we do affects someone like in their home.
Right.
Right. When you talk about business license fees that are being discussed, or mm-hmm. electric rate fees, or garbage, how many things that are really done on the national level affect you at your house?
Exactly.
Very few things. So it's, in a lot of ways, I think it's harder. It's more personal. I think that's maybe why people just get so petty and so nasty about these things, because they take the things so personally. And I think our culture has changed a lot. It's people used to be able to respectfully agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now people just want to burn you down. It's like it's either my way. We're so polarized in our thinking, and so people, if you disagree, they really just they get nasty, and like there's no room for disagreement. I think that's a challenge. I think and not talk political parties, but you have some parties that will be like, hey, we allow people to disagree, and then you have some like if it's not our way, it's like you're the devil, and we're going to do everything we can to destroy your life. And so,
do you limit that dueling has gone out of style? It seems like you had a more polite sense of disagreement, because like a way of disagreeing back when a person goes, do I disagree that much? No, not really.
Well, we have challenges in our community when it comes to, we talk about dueling. We got gun battles, in the streets and mall and everything else, and we have people who can't. I think it's a classic example. So you got the Facebook trolls who are out there just doing their thing, and then you got the people who have been taught, well, I'm just going to get a gun and do that. And both really aren't a whole lot different. I mean, they are in some ways, they're in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, rather than being able to talk things out and have a civil discourse, I mean, they go to an extreme,
Well, social media has really contributed to the decivilizing of many, because I mean, people will tweet things and they'll get on, like you said, the ghost Facebook accounts. They'll say things online all day long that they know better than to say to a man's face.
Sure. And we have a lot of outside influence too. There's a lot of folks that don't even live inside these city limits who are getting on there, and they are trying to influence what happens in our city. I think people lose sight of that too. These ghost accounts are not always just local city residents who are just too afraid to speak out of their own, accord. So we have outside influence too. Yeah. So, I mean, all these things are factors, but, we do have to, you have to have that courage. You have to have the willingness to stand up. And I do think at the end of the day, let the facts speak for themselves. Yeah. Usually people will get, nasty and go to an extreme when they've lost an argument or they can't really back it up with facts. Yeah. And that was something I thought that Charlie Kirk was so great about. When you think about, he was willing to have a conversation with anybody. And let's talk facts. And I think that's what we need more of. We need anyone to be able to talk. We need to be able to talk facts. And it's okay if we disagree on certain things, but I hope we'll see more dialogue. I hope we'll see more, maybe more commissioners be willing to speak up and to have that discussion. And again, there's been very few votes where I've been the only one who has felt a certain way. So, only a couple times was I the only vote, and I guarantee those votes are going to haunt some of those commissioners for a long time, because wanting to raise electric rates when we're making $20 million a year on our electric service doesn't play well in politics or in policy. Right. And so at the end of the day, we got to do what's best for our people. And I'm glad to have the opportunity. And one last thing I want to say before, I know we're getting close on time. My walk with the Lord is tested every day, as with many. And, but I do feel like, I pray a lot about our decisions. I pray a lot about, and I've talked to our pastor many times about, certain things. I want to make sure that I'm doing this not for me, not for my own flesh, not for my own personal agenda, but really, I don't consider myself a politician as much as I consider myself a public servant in this capacity. And so I do pray for wisdom and guidance, and I appreciate the prayers. Many people have prayed for our wisdom and guidance, and I take that very seriously, and I'm very grateful for that because I'm not doing this for my own selfish ambitions by any means. I'm doing this just to serve our community. As long as the Lord is willing, I will do it.
It's a very hard thing to separate. I had another candidate who was willing to come and talk to me, who was running for a post here in the area, and I had at that time, and I don't want to again go into down too much of a rabbit trail, but at the time he said, he said exactly the same thing. He doesn't consider himself a politician; he's more of a public servant. And I said, well, that's very laudable. How many politicians do you know who would say otherwise? I mean, how many politicians do you know will say, you know what? I'm a run-of-the-mill politician that will sell his mom for the vote that he wants on his favorite thing. Like they won't. No one. Everyone says they're a public servant. So in this regard, I guess some of my cynicism crops up.
Sure, proof's in the pudding, though, right?
Exactly. So what we do is we go, let's let the work speak for itself.
That's right.
And in this case, what spoke to me was, okay, I'm watching someone who, again, not constituted as a contrarian, but willing to be the minority view from time to time, which suggested possibly some uncommon fortitude, which I don't see in abundance. It was refreshing.
Yeah. Well,
even if I disagree with you on something,
sure.
I'm not even sure that I did, but I didn't, with the road diet thing, I don't have enough data, but in that case, even if I went, well, okay, still I respected that there was this principled position on that and willingness to go, That's a data point. You put enough of those together. Now you can start kind of looking at longitudinally that someone is, okay, this public servant versus politician label. I guess that's something that can be ascribed by others more faithfully now.
I think the clearest example of politician versus a public servant is who's willing to give the hard truth. Right. Because I see too many people will go and change their message and tailor their message depending upon who they're talking to. And they will never take a hard stand on anything. Yeah. They will truly just they will never say anything that is challenging.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a politician. I mean, it's someone who they're always going to try to say the right thing. They're always, who am I talking to today? Okay, well, I'm going to, so right. Rather than speaking their convictions and speaking truth to what is best for the community based on the facts. And I don't want to keep coming back to the road diet, but you brought it up last.
Sorry about that.
But, when people talk about...
I thought it was a good example.
It was a great example. When people talk about like the data, and some people are like, well, there's less trucks through downtown right now because of the road diet.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah, there are fewer trucks downtown right now. Maybe it's because we have these two big electronic signs on the west side and east side that say downtown congestion, use the circle. Maybe that's why.
Right.
Maybe it has nothing to do with the actual traffic pattern downtown, but these two huge electronic signs that we put out there for a month that directed trucks to go around the circle, which, by the way, for some reason we took them out now. So it's like, things that we as the city can do.
It's not as congested.
Right. It's like, okay. So,
right.
You got to try to look at all the facts. And that's the challenging part, I think, in today's world is the media. There used to be a lot more media presence. And you could actually have, I think, more information get out in full details with an honest media. And today, I mean, we don't have the Dothan Eagle. We don't have a lot of ways. And so, why do I talk to the media? Almost every time they ask me for a quote, I don't just run to them. In almost all cases, they're asking me, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm going to respond because that's our job to get that out to the people. But it's hard to communicate to everybody because elderly folks aren't always on Facebook.
Right.
And if we're not watching, these certain types of media, the newspapers aren't going around like they used to go around. And so connecting with your constituency is harder today, I believe, than what it might have used to be.
It's a very important but delicate skill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my father worked in California. He was an engineer, but his company worked in conjunction with the California government on solving water distribution problems. I asked him what was the most difficult part of the job, and he said the art of the soundbite.
That is tough, no doubt.
And I was like, well, what is a soundbite? It's the irreducible sentence about your message that fully conveys what you mean, but can't be cut up to sound like something you don't mean.
No, and true, very true.
I don't even know how he's able to do that. I myself have been burned many times because I was talking to a reporter thinking I was a conversation. No, I wasn't. I was giving them all sorts of different contrary sound bites that could be edited in different ways. Like, oh my gosh.
I haven't been tricked by any reporters here in Dothan. Most all the, WTVY, WDHN, all the folks we've talked to and dealt with have been pretty honest. But I will tell you, it is tough when you get asked 10 questions, right? And you feel like you gave some really solid answers to 9 of the 10, but somehow that 10th one ends up,
That's
so
the one where you're picking your nose or whatever. That's the one that's going to make the cut.
It's like, really? Like, I wish you would have gone with this, And so does the news have a narrative? Sometimes. Do they try to get clicks? Yeah, sometimes. But I feel like they've done a pretty good job trying to give both sides of the arguments. But that is a very challenging thing is, how you can try to stay on message and not have people distracted by the noise of what you say. Mm-hmm. And I do support, we have, like I said, great staff, great leadership overall. We have just a great team of people, great police, great fire. Our city should be very proud of a lot of things we have going on. And my comments in the commission meeting yesterday 2 days ago, at the beginning, it's like we have a lot of things to have hope for. We have a lot of things going well for us, and we have some challenges, no doubt. But try to stay positive, try to be factual, and try to keep moving forward is what I think we need to do.
Well, thank you very much. It's encouraging to talk to an independent player, not an NPC. So, really, thank you very much for coming to talk to me.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.